United Nations, September 22, 2025, Palestinian President Mahmud Abbas delivered a powerful video address to a United Nations summit on the two-state solution, calling on Hamas to disarm and hand over authority to the Palestinian Authority, PA. His remarks marked one of the most direct and uncompromising statements from Abbas against the Gaza-based faction since the October 7, 2023, attack on Israel that triggered renewed conflict in the region. In his speech, Abbas sought to place himself and the Palestinian Authority at the center of the international conversation about peace, signaling a vision of a future Palestinian state free from armed militias and governed by a single legitimate security force. Speaking firmly, Abbas left little room for ambiguity. Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, declared, "Hamas will have no role in governing Gaza." Hamas and other factions must surrender their weapons to the Palestinian Authority. We want a unified state without weapons, a state governed by one law and one legitimate security force. We emphasize our condemnation of the crimes of the occupation. We also condemn the killing and detention of civilians, including Hamas actions on October 7, 2023. The statement drew immediate attention across the summit floor and in capitals around the world. For many observers, it signaled Abbas's intent to reclaim political and security control over Gaza, a territory that has been under Hamas rule since the violent split with Fatah in 2007. The timing of Abbas's remarks is significant. The UN summit on the two-state solution had already been framed as a critical test of whether global powers could reinvigorate a peace process long considered frozen. The war triggered by Hamas's October 2023 assault on Israel, followed by months of devastating Israeli retaliation in Gaza, had shifted international attention back to the core question of Palestinian unity and statehood. For Abbas, the opportunity to address the world at the UN was not just symbolic, it was strategic. By demanding that Hamas lay down arms, Abbas positioned himself as a leader capable of offering the international community and Israel a credible partner in negotiations. His words carried the weight of a leader determined to show that Palestinians, under unified leadership, could govern through institutions rather than militias. While Abbas placed clear responsibility on Hamas, he also balanced his remarks by directing condemnation at Israel's occupation. He stressed that the Palestinian Authority rejects violence against civilians regardless of who commits it. His dual message, holding Hamas accountable while criticizing Israeli actions, was carefully calibrated. For international diplomats, it suggested Abbas was attempting to rebuild credibility at home and abroad, presenting himself as both a critic of occupation and a leader willing to take difficult stances against Palestinian factions. Inside the UN chamber, Abbas's remarks were received with mixed responses. Some Western diplomats noted that his clear condemnation of Hamas's October 7th actions aligned with their calls for Palestinian leaders to reject militancy outright. Others, however, questioned whether Abbas had the political leverage or popular support to enforce such a demand in Gaza. Middle Eastern delegations were cautious. While sympathetic to the vision of a unified Palestinian state, several envoys privately wondered whether Abbas' authority, limited mainly to the West Bank, was strong enough to dictate terms to Hamas. For years, repeated reconciliation attempts between Fatah and Hamas had failed, and the call to surrender weapons was seen by some as aspirational rather than immediately practical. The sharp division between Hamas and Fatah has defined Palestinian politics for nearly 2 decades. Following the 2006 legislative elections, which Hamas won, a violent split left the Islamist group in control of Gaza, while Abbas's Fatah movement retained control of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. Since then, efforts at reconciliation have been marred by distrust, competing ideologies, and external pressures. Abbas's latest declaration reflects a continuation of his long-standing position that armed factions must eventually submit to the authority of the state. But by stating it so forcefully before the world, Abbas elevated the demand from internal politics to a global stage. The reference to Hamas's October 7, 2023 attack was crucial. That day marked the deadliest assault on Israel in decades, leaving hundreds dead and sparking a military response that devastated Gaza's infrastructure and displaced large parts of its population. By directly naming and condemning Hamas's actions from that day, Abbas distanced himself and the Palestinian Authority from responsibility for the attack. It was also a gesture toward Israel and international actors, showing a readiness to denounce violence against civilians without ambiguity. Abbas's remarks could have far-reaching consequences for the stalled peace process. For the United States and European powers, his demand that Hamas disarm could serve as a precondition for renewed diplomatic engagement. For Arab states, particularly those who have pursued normalization with Israel, it offered a potential path forward, a Palestinian leadership prepared to commit to unity and institutional governance. However, the feasibility of Abbas' demand remains in doubt. Hamas, though militarily weakened, continues to command loyalty in Gaza, where many Palestinians see it as a resistance movement against occupation. Surrendering weapons to the PA, especially under current conditions, appears unlikely in the near term. Abbas' firm stance carries political risks. Within the Palestinian political landscape, his authority has waned in recent years, with critics accusing him of ineffectiveness and of maintaining security coordination with Israel at the expense of Palestinian self-determination. By taking a hard line against Hamas, Abbas risks alienating segments of Palestinian society that still see the group as a legitimate actor in resistance. Yet Abbas may be betting on international backing to bolster his position. If global powers rally around his vision of a disarmed Hamas and a unified Palestinian state, he could strengthen his domestic legitimacy by portraying himself as the leader capable of securing international recognition and support. Abbas's address came at a summit explicitly focused on the two-state solution, a framework that envisions Israel and Palestine coexisting as independent states. While the idea has long been the cornerstone of international diplomacy, its practical implementation has seemed increasingly remote amid continued settlement expansion, periodic wars, and political deadlock. By presenting a clear vision of a Palestinian state under one law and one security force, Abbas revived discussion on how a two-state arrangement could function in practice. His emphasis on unity and legitimacy was an attempt to reassure skeptics that a future Palestinian state would not be fragmented or governed by militias. The real test of Abbas's declaration will come in the months ahead. Whether Hamas shows any willingness to engage in disarmament discussions and whether Israel and global powers view Abbas's call as credible will determine if his speech marks a turning point or merely another rhetorical moment in a long, unresolved conflict. For now, Abbas has seized international attention with one of his strongest public denunciations of Hamas and one of his clearest visions for Palestinian unity. Whether he can translate words into action remains uncertain, but the significance of his UN address lies in its boldness and timing. As one diplomat observed after the session, Abbas's statement was less about immediate political reality and more about setting a marker for the future. It was a declaration that, at least in vision, the path to Palestinian statehood requires the end of armed factionalism. Hamas will have no role in governing Gaza. Hamas and other factions must surrender their weapons to the Palestinian Authority. We want a unified state without weapons, a state governed by one law and one legitimate security force. We emphasize our condemnation of the crimes of the occupation. We also condemn the killing and detention of civilians, including Hamas actions on October 7, 2023.
كما ندين قتل وأسر المدنيين بما في ذلك ما قامت به حماس في 7 أكتوبر 2023.